Hi, I'm Annie Proetti, the board chair of the Walton Family Foundation. It's the holiday season, a time when many Americans gather with family. There are multiple generations coming together, generations whose life stages and experiences impact how they see the world. The conversations can be exciting and eye-opening, and at times they can also be challenging. But when we listen and learn from each other, we are better for it. That's how we think about our work as a family-led foundation. Everyone brings their own point of view, and everyone is encouraged to express their own point of view. No voice is louder than the next, and we value different opinions and build on our shared values. That's what my grandparents had in mind when they launched the foundation more than 3 decades ago. My grandfather once said, "Great ideas come from everywhere, you just have to listen and look for them." His wisdom guides how we think about education, the environment, and our home region program. In each of these programs, we work together with you to create access to opportunity for all people and communities. But before we can do that, we need to look to those communities and listen to their voices and ideas. So many times we find that people closest to the challenges that we want to tackle are also the ones with the best ideas and the most creative solutions. As a foundation, we can help bring people together and support big ideas that lead to big change. And that's exactly what we're here today to explore: collaboration. Collaboration doesn't just happen. It takes an intentional valuing of all voices. And collaboration requires moving past divisions and emphasizing values, lived experiences, and shared learning. Today, we'll examine efforts to foster collaboration across generations, sectors, and communities. And we'll be joined by grantees who are looking and listening for great ideas that can lead to real impact. So first, we'll hear from journalist Rachel Janfaza. She reports on young voters, notably Gen Z and their perspectives, and her work has appeared on CNN, Teen Vogue, and MTV. She's also a fellow with our education program. And in that role, Rachel is helping us to better understand how young Americans see their role in shaping the future. So Rachel, over to you.
Thank you, Annie, for the kind introduction. As mentioned, I'm Rachel Janfaza, a Walton Family Foundation Fellow researching and writing about Gen Z, the generation born roughly between 1997 and 2012. Gen Z's oldest members are coming of age and entering leadership positions. In fact, one was just elected to Congress. More than 8 million Gen Zers were eligible to vote for the first time this year, and they're letting us know what they think about their education, their health, and the kind of world they want to live in. It will surprise no one that they have strong views on collaboration. To learn more about Gen Z, the ones who will inherit our society and our planet, the Walton Family Foundation went straight to the source, asking the questions: how does Gen Z want to participate? How do they think we can and should be collaborating? How can we work together to solve our biggest problems? What we learned is surprising. This generation has hope for a better future. Surprising when you think about all that they've lived through. And they really want to collaborate with their peers and their communities, but haven't had good role models for how to do it. They want to see leaders, including politicians and corporations, take steps to affect change, not just that will benefit their lives, but the lives of their children and grandchildren too. They want leaders to listen to the voices and values of people and not just talk about the issues. As leaders, we must respond with a similar we, not me mentality. To make progress on the long-term challenges we face, institutions, including philanthropy, must look past what we don't agree on and focus on what we do agree on: good, safe schools, plenty of healthy water, economic opportunity. We may not all agree on how we get there, but we certainly want the same things for the next generation. For the Walton Family Foundation, this means building diverse coalitions across sectors, including government, business, and communities, and not just working with other foundations and nonprofits. And while I'm a member of Gen Z myself, my peers say it best. Let's hear from them directly in this video report on Gen Z's views on civic engagement and collaboration.
I think it's really important to have younger generations and also representatives from groups that have been historically disenfranchised at the table when making these policy decisions.
Because when everyone gets together to safely speak about how they want something to change, there is a greater chance of it actually happening. I think everyone kind of has their own role, which contributes to that certain cause that you're trying to achieve.
No matter what, you need to go out and vote no matter what. You have to make your voice heard. And going out and voting is the way of making your voice heard. Maybe not as meaningful as I would like it to be.
Civic engagement is definitely one of the most important ways to bring about change. I think that real change comes from the people in a country, and the leaders and people in power will answer to the people.
It brings individuals and communities together to work on something and protects public values, and it just makes a change in the community.
And we all need to come together and work to help better our community and our country. And for that, I think there needs to be a fair representation from all different types of people, different races, genders, religions, beliefs, and even work status.
It's good to listen to the other side of the issue and see their differences and similarities before agreeing on one specific side. Nothing is ever going to come out perfect if you decide to do the extreme.
I think the people that need to be at the table making meaningful progress are the people who are affected by the decisions being made.
I think that it's always possible at the end of the day to find common ground with those that you disagree with, if everyone is being really honest and open about the source of their source for their perspectives and experiences that have shaped who they are and what they believe.
I define collaboration between two people as being an exchange of ideas, a period of time where people are brainstorming together and allowing the diversity of their skills and opinions to blend together in an effective means.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate your insights on Gen Z and young Americans. Their views on collaboration and civic engagement are so important as we think about the work in each of our program areas. And speaking of our program areas, we will now hear from grantees in education, environment, and our home region. They will share how they are looking and listening for great ideas and how we can learn and lead together.
Thank you, Annie. I'm Khalid Ahmadzai, the Director of Economic Advancement for Canopy Northwest Arkansas, a nonprofit organization based here in Fayetteville and that works to support refugees who reside in Northwest Arkansas in the community. At Canopy, we are continuously looking to the community we serve to better understand how we can create a pathway of opportunity for them. We work to ensure all newcomers have the core necessities vital to build a new life in the States: financial self-sufficiency through meaningful work, case management, and cultural orientation. Newly arrived refugees are expected to be self-sufficient by 3 to 6 months after their arrival. But feeling settled in a new country, in a new community, especially if you're learning the language, the transportation, everything, can take much longer. Through Canopy's Long Welcome Plan, we are able to extend and expand these core services for up to 5 years after the arrival, helping better ensure access and opportunity for our clients. Now that Canopy is entering the 7th year of its existence, I see many examples of how people who are initially welcomed to Northwest Arkansas as newly arrived refugees are actively investing in our community in remarkable ways. I'm joined today by Echa Mukandama, a client who resettled in Northwest Arkansas about 5 years ago. And since then, he joined Canopy's inaugural entrepreneurship class and started Mosey's Auto Repair store in Fayetteville. He's also a father, and I consider him a great friend. Echa,
Thank you.
welcome. So Echa, tell me about your journey from your home country of Congo to Arkansas.
Thank you. I was born in Congo and grew up in Burundi as a refugee. And we moved to Burundi because of the war. And we lived in Burundi for 16 years before coming here. Was living there. I did a mechanic school, basic mechanic school. And when I finished, I went to the shop to learn a mechanic. And I was doing mechanic in the street with friends who were just training me. I did a car mechanic for almost 2 years, and that's where I decided to learn a big truck mechanic. And I did a big truck mechanic for 5 years, where I was taught by my brother. And I learned that until when I heard that I had a chance to come to the US. And I was really happy because that was my dream. I was thinking that one day I will go to the US. And likely I was one of the people who got a chance to come to the US.
So, Echa, tell me a little bit about when you came to America, what was your first job and how that evolved to where you are?
When I came here, I really wanted to do a mechanic, but friends was telling me that I cannot find a mechanic school until a mechanic job until I go to school. And I asked how long does it gonna take me for me to finish this mechanic school. They told me that it's 2 years, and I was thinking, how am I going to survive doing the work? And that I feel like I didn't really want to do. But when we got here, since my English wasn't good enough for me to even go ask a job and get a job, Canopy helped me and my cousins to find our first job, and we was doing work as a housekeeping. Yes.
So, did you give up on your dream of being a mechanic?
While doing the work, we used to be visited by Canopy members every day. They ask, "Are you guys okay? Are you guys feeling comfortable? You guys getting everything you want?" And I keep talking about mechanic. I say, I love mechanic, and I'm feeling like I'll be very happy if you guys can help me get this job. And one of Canopy member who is our co-sponsor was just talking about that to his friends, and likely the owner of Ozark Original Transit was there and say, yeah, we can take him and try and see what he can do. And I got trained by a Canopy employee who trained me about the interview. until the day that they told me to go to the interview. I went to the interview, and I was lucky to get the job.
And at that time, it was just before COVID that you reached out and said you wanted to start your own business. And we were in the process of partner with this organization and Neighborhood Development Center in Minnesota to get their curriculum and start the entrepreneurship program. And at that time, we registered the classes for the first inaugural class, and then COVID hit. So the businesses were closing, and there was 10, 11 individuals who wanted to come to class to start a business. So tell a little bit about the 12-week entrepreneurship class and what you gained from that and how that helped you start your business.
I can say that before I get to the class, I had an idea of doing my own business, but I didn't know where to start. And when I spoke to the director of Canopy, she told me that that was a good time because Canopy is preparing entrepreneurship class to where I can get a lot of help for getting all the paperwork that I need for me to have my own shop. And I participate on those 12 weeks, and I can say that before I was thinking that I was ready to start my business, but I found that there is a lot of things that I didn't know that I learned from the class that we had.
So through this partnership, we were able to secure a loan, and so that you would be able to put the first payment and get the. Tell me a little bit about that journey of the process of how Moses Auto Repair and sales started.
Yes. I didn't know about Forge, and I knew Forge from the class. And Philip, the employee of Forge Found, he came to the class, explain what they offer when someone need a loan, and that's where I met him, and they told us what is the documents that I need to have in order for me to get a loan, and all of that. I had to sit with Khalid for you to help me get the loan, and I was lucky to have that because we are new here in the US, and there is a lot of conditions that we need to have in order for you to get a loan. And one of them is a credit score. I had only 3 years here, and I didn't know about the credit score. And because of talking to them, they understood that I'm a new person and I needed the help, and I get the help from Forge Found through Canopy.
So, Echa, what do you wish more people know about the immigrant community, both here in Northwest Arkansas and around the world?
I can say that it's hard to leave your home country going to a different country. And I think one of the keys that help us to understand the life and make a life is a refugee community, because when you get here we don't know a lot of laws here, we don't speak English, we don't know how to go to the hospital to ask for what we need. and all those things we get from a refugee community for us to understand where we are and how we are going to live a life here. And that's really, really helpful.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Great job. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Khalid and Acha. I'm Romy Drucker, Director of the Walton Family Foundation's Education Program. Joining me today is Raj Chetty, Director of Opportunity Insights and a Professor of Economics at Harvard University. Raj's groundbreaking research with Opportunity Insights listens to people and communities across the country in order to identify barriers to economic opportunity and develop scalable solutions. The research is having a profound impact on the way we're thinking about creating new pathways to upward mobility and lifelong opportunity for youth. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Raj. You've written extensively about the American dream as it relates to social and economic mobility for children and all Americans. You say in your research that it's fading and that only half of today's children will grow up to earn as much as their parents. What is the state of the American dream today, and how should our partners think about that dream as it relates to both absolute mobility and relative mobility?
Thanks, Romy. It's a pleasure to have a chance to talk with you. So, as you noted, I do think the American dream is fading in the sense that in the middle of the last century, if you were a kid growing up in America, you could virtually count on, for sure, having a higher standard of living than your parents did. To take one example, we estimate that for kids born back in the 1940s, 92% of those kids went on to earn more than their parents did. But if we look at kids today, as you noted, it's become a 50-50 shot, a coin flip, as to whether you're going to do better than your parents. And so in that sense, the American dream is fading in what we call absolute terms. What are your absolute chances of doing better than your parents did? Now, I want to emphasize that big picture story of the fading American dream is not universally true. There are parts of the country where the American dream is still well and alive. There are subgroups for which your prospects of doing better and rising up relative to your parents are still quite high. And so we need to be very careful when we think about answering the question, is the American dream fading? The answer really depends upon which part of the country, which people we're talking about.
Do we have any sense, Raj, of how the pandemic has impacted the American dream? And are we starting to gather any kind of qualitative or quantitative information about that?
Yeah, so my sense is that if you look at the factors that led to the fading of the American dream to begin with, which is basically a growing inequality and a stagnation of wages for people at the low end of the income distribution, a slowdown of rates of education relative to technological progress that were driving down incomes and so forth, a lot of those factors have only accelerated during the pandemic. If we look at early indicators like educational progress in schools, or on the other side of the balance sheet, technological progress, everything continues to go in the direction of being stacked against American kids growing up particularly in lower income families where they're completing fewer lessons in school, are exhibiting greater achievement and learning loss gaps relative to higher income peers. And so while we don't yet have data, Romy, on what fraction of kids are earning more than their parents for the kids growing up in the pandemic, because obviously we'll have to wait till those kids grow up to see what happens, my guess would be, unfortunately, if anything, the trend is going to be exacerbated, the downward trend, by the pandemic.
That's really helpful in terms of understanding how some of the near-term challenges communities have been facing are going to impact their livelihood going forward. One of the things we think a lot about at the foundation is community-driven change, and your research suggests that where a child comes from, his or her neighborhood, even in some cases down to the city block, has a large impact on
how they grow up and their ability to achieve the American dream we've been talking about. You developed an atlas that tracks that kind of social capital. Could you talk to us a little bit about the atlas itself and what some of the key findings are about the impact of neighborhoods?
Yeah, absolutely. So over the past several years, our team has used anonymized data from tax records and other large-scale big data sources to try to understand the roots of the American dream. So where is it that kids really have the chance of thriving and rising up relative to their parents? And it turns out that it depends a lot. Your chances of rising up depend a great deal on where you're growing up. There are some parts of the country, for example, the Great Plains, places like rural Iowa, where even today the American dream is well and alive. Kids growing up in low-income and middle-income families do great relative to the prior generation. But then there are other parts of the country, cities like Charlotte, North Carolina, or much of the Southeast, where kids growing up in families at the same income level have much poorer prospects of rising up. Now, what's more, as we zoom in and look at the data at finer and finer levels, look at one neighborhood of New York City versus another, or one part of San Francisco versus another, we find that these differences don't just emerge across regions or across cities, but as you noted, across city blocks, across different sides of the street in some cases. And so naturally the question becomes, what is it that's leading kids in some of these places to do really well and other kids to unfortunately be trapped in poverty, where they have very limited chances of rising up from an economic perspective, but also importantly, face commensurate challenges in terms of health, a high rate of incarceration, lots of other challenges that limit their opportunities. And digging into this question, we and many other social scientists have identified a number of factors that predict these differences in economic mobility across areas. These are things like the quality of local schools, the degree of segregation, levels of inequality. But it turns out one factor really stands out in terms of predicting these differences in economic mobility, and that's social capital. Our most recent work measures the degree of social interaction between people from different class backgrounds. So to put it in very simple terms, we use data from Facebook to look at who people are friends with across the United States, and we measure the degree of cross-class interaction. As a low-income person, what fraction of your friends are high income? And it turns out, Romy, that this variable, the degree of cross-class interaction, is the single strongest predictor of economic mobility that anyone has identified to date. And our sense is that this type of cross-class interaction may be really critical for economic mobility because it shapes kids' aspirations. It gives them information about things like applying for college. If you grow up in a community where even if your own parents haven't gone to college, you have many friends whose parents have, and that maybe changes your outlook on life. It may also directly give you access to internships and jobs that you otherwise wouldn't have had. So I view that as a key area for focus in research and policy on economic mobility going forward, to think about how we create more of that economic connectedness and cross-class interaction.
That's a powerful point about the importance of integrating financial supports and structural supports. And as you said, really ties back together with what you said about the importance of social capital. One last question. One of the things we appreciate so much about Opportunity Insights is not just the incredible quality and power of your research, but how committed you are to putting it into practice. There's lots of local groups listening in. What advice do you have to them for making this research actionable in their own neighborhoods and communities across the country?
Yeah, thanks for that, Romy. So one simple thing I would suggest is take a look at the data that our team has put out, which we try to really make tailored to specific communities. So for example, you can go to this website, socialcapital.org, the Social Capital Atlas, and literally type in the name of your school or your college or your zip code of interest, and look at various measures of social capital in your own community. To what extent are low and high income people interacting with each other? And if that level of interaction is low, is it because there's a lot of segregation in your community where, say, low and high income kids are attending different schools? Or is it because of what we call friending bias, that you have people within the same building attending the same schools and so forth, but there's still a lot of self-segregation within those communities? And by looking at that type of data, you can start to pursue solutions that really target the problems that a particular community faces.
Thank you so much for a terrific conversation, Raj. I'm going to turn it over now to our Executive Director, Carol Stern, and food writer, educator, and activist, Mark Bittman. Carol and Mark are at Glenwood Farm having a conversation about learning and leading together on food sustainability.
Hi, I'm Carol Stern, Executive Director of the Walton Family Foundation, and I am so excited to be joining my friend, food journalist, food activist, Mark Bittman, here at Glenwood Center for Regional Food and Farming. Mark, your work is just phenomenal. You know, your work in advancing food sustainability, it exemplifies what we at the foundation truly believe in, which is learning and leading. And you do that every day, and it's remarkable. Through your food writing, through your advocacy work, you are expanding the table of people who care about this issue, and I look forward to hearing more about it as we talk. You know, someone who Googles a recipe unknowingly finds themselves often on your site, learning about the origins of that food. And so someone who didn't even know they would care about sustainability suddenly gets brought into the table of all of us who do care. And that's really powerful. So let's talk about your work a little bit.
Well, thanks for that, Carol. Looking forward to it.
So Mark, I obviously have read a lot about you, have read a lot of what you've written, but you know, tell us a little bit about the journey, you know, how you went from food critic to really food advocate, like how you moved into the whole sustainability and equality field.
There was a time I was reviewing restaurants, which I didn't like that much, and then I was writing about cooking, which I liked much more. And that went on for 20 years and more. And then it just became more and more clear that things were going wrong in the world of nutrition, that things were going wrong in the world of farming, that things were just becoming more difficult in food in general. And I started reading about that. And this is probably 2000 or so. I think the writing was on the wall that we were eating too much meat, or farming was destroying the land instead of rebuilding it. There were really problems with food. Junk food, of course, ultra-processed food. And it was impossible I was just talking about this actually. There was a way in which I was losing the enjoyment of food by beginning to understand how it was produced and the impact it had on the land and on our health. Just recently I've been talking about there's got to be some place for me to live in which I can be critical of farming and supportive of good farming, good nutrition, and so on, but also remember how much love there is involved in cooking and eating and food in general, how much love and nurturing, because it's lost a little of that somewhere along the way.
I think it's interesting, because I know, like, even in our family, you know, like, food is so central to everything that we do. You know, everybody comes home for dinner. You know, everybody's got a favorite.
And I've been writing about it. You know, it's just lost a little of certainly I still love cooking, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good. So besides climate, you know, what are the things that really kind of help you to decide the foods that you're going to pick, or, you know?
I mean, I think it's pretty simple. You eat as little junk food as you can, as few ultra-processed foods as you can. We all need to eat, almost all of us need to eat fewer animal products, and we all need to eat more plant products as close to the source as possible. And that's, you know, that is about climate, but it's also about for other ecological reasons and for our personal health as well. But it's, I mean, really, in a way, it's like next question, because that's so simple. That thing, less junk food, fewer animal products, more foods from the plant kingdom. It's what we all need to think about.
All right, but I'm going grocery shopping tomorrow, and I know nothing, okay? And I've just heard what you said. Give me some advice. What am I thinking about? What am I looking for?
I mean, if you fill half your cart in the produce aisle, you're kind of doing the right thing. And then the rest is stuff you like, but clearly you want more, you want more foods that don't have ingredient lists. You want fewer processed foods. 60% of the calories in the American diet now are in the form of ultra-processed food, and most of that is bad. And that's stuff that you don't, none of us could make it. The ingredients to make it aren't done in the kitchen. It's really factory food to a large extent. Avoiding that is really key.
And do you think we've come a long way, or you think we have a long way to go for like the general public to kind of understand that?
I mean, it's both. We've come a long way. I mean, you and I grew up when supermarkets were a tenth the size of what they are now. So there was less produce. So you could say, oh yeah, there's way more produce, but there was less junk food too. So there's way more junk food. So there are more choices. I think people are more conscious about food. I don't think people, public health people, journalists often go on about education. Certainly I'm an advocate for education, but I think people know what a good diet means. Very few people are that fictional you who goes into the supermarket and doesn't know anything. Most people know. It's just a question of availability, affordability, accessibility.
What about willingness? You think the willingness is there?
Of course there's willingness, but junk food, ultra-processed food, is literally engineered to be addictive. Like, we crave it because it's designed for us to crave it. And everybody craves it. Almost everybody craves it. So there's a whole thing about, yes, of course, we have to be better intentioned, we have to know more, blah, blah, but a lot of this is about supply, and it goes back to that 60% of the calories that are in the supermarket are, generally speaking, not good for us. So someone's buying that stuff.
Right, exactly. So if the public has kind of come along, and I would agree with you, I think people are more conscious and more aware, definitely more so than when we were growing up. That I totally agree with you. How do we get them that passionate about wondering where their water comes from?
Water is tough. I mean, I think it's probably easier if you live in California because you are really conscious of, not just California, of course, the Southwest and other parts of the country too. You're really conscious of the quality of it, the amount of it, and so on. So for those people, I think those are issues. For those of us who live in the Northeast, it's a little trickier because it does, if it doesn't rain for a month, we think it's a drought.
Right.
But then it pours for days. So it's not as much of an issue. I think water, we are concerned about quantity. There's an awful lot, 80% is used in agriculture. So we need to be smarter about how we use it, but we also have to be smarter about how we treat it. So it's not just quantity, but quality, and what are we putting in the land, because that all eventually makes its way into the water.
Water, absolutely.
Again, those are, a lot of what we're talking about are policy level issues, and it's hard for an individual to affect what's going to happen. How do you affect your water supply? It's not like if you have a well, okay, but if you live in a city, you've got to make this an issue locally. You've got to be talking about it.
Let's talk about that for a minute. So if I wanted to make this an issue locally, so where do I start?
We almost never ask our politicians what they think about agriculture, what they think about the food supply, what they think about where our food comes from, access to land, food sovereignty, quality of water, what we're putting in the soil, how agriculture is done. Those are important questions, and if we force politicians to think about that stuff, we'll get some answers. If we don't make those political issues, then politicians aren't going to talk about them, and we're not going to be able to say, gee, we'd really like it if there were fewer nitrates in the soil. We'd like it if there were fewer antibiotics in the food supply. We'd like it if there were fewer pesticides being used every day. Politicians don't hear that enough.
Yeah, I think also, as individual citizens, if we start asking questions about where our food comes from, is the farmer using good agricultural practices? Like, as consumers, we can have impact as well.
We can, and I think one of the things we learned during COVID is that shorter supply chains are better supply chains, and that to the extent that we can support regional and local agriculture, we're eating better food, and we're supporting the landscape around us. We're supporting our own land, and I think more and more people recognize that. Well, it also is true that ultra-processed food, junk food, is really not manufactured down
locally.
The road.
Right, it's not a local product.
Yeah.
It's not growing on the tree, right? This is true. So what gives you hope?
Well, I mean, conversations like this and the fact that you wouldn't be here asking me these things 10 years ago, or you weren't. So that's good. And that question about the politicians, I think, is an important message to spread. And there are more people there are more politicians who are thinking about food than were before. I get asked what I think by politicians now. That didn't used to happen. And there are people in both the House and the Senate who are pushing food as a bipartisan issue, food as an issue that concerns everyone, and food as an issue that needs to be addressed more seriously.
Absolutely. No, and I think, as you said earlier, the public is coming along. And I think they are looking for ways to be part of the process of getting what's on our table healthier and better for us. The points you make are really great, and I do think that the general public wants to be more engaged. So thank you so much for just giving us some ideas on what we can do.
Well,
really
thanks
appreciate
for doing
it.
this, Carol. It's really great.
What an amazing group to learn from. One of the joys of my work at the foundation, and really for our entire board, is hearing the creative approaches to solving problems from our grantees. It's so exciting to see what Khaled Ahmadazi and Canopy Northwest Arkansas are doing to support refugees like Etcha Mukandama. They're meeting immediate needs and connecting people to opportunities. And I am always amazed and intrigued by the work of Dr. Raj Chetty and Opportunity Insights. He and his team are listening to people and communities across the country. What they uncover helps us better understand barriers to opportunity and what it takes to remove them. And finally, Mark Bittman. He's showing how to bring others along with him on a path to better food sustainability. They are just a few of the hundreds of creative and committed grantees that we are privileged to work with. People who every day look past differences and find ways to work together because they know that that's how problems get solved. And I am grateful for their efforts and their knowledge. At the foundation, we do not have all the answers. I do know that. But we are ready to learn from people and communities and to lead together.